The applause was thunderous when she kissed him on the cheek. I was standing 3 feet away, holding a glass of club soda like a forgotten waiter, watching my wife kiss another man in front of her entire company. And everyone clapped like it. It was the most natural thing in the world. No one introduced me. No one even looked at me twice. They just clapped, laughed, and kept sipping their drinks while she basked in the glow of their admiration. It was supposed to be a recognition event, a fancy rooftop cocktail hour for her firm's quarterly achievements. But somewhere between the valet taking my keys and the first tray of mini crab cakes, it had turned into something else entirely, something performative, something humiliating. He was introduced as the man behind the magic, the host, the one who always believed in her, and when they handed her the engraved glass trophy, she turned to him first, not me. "You made this possible, Collier," she said, smiling. Collier, even his name sounded like it wore cufflinks. He had that obnoxious, polished confidence of a man who never waited to be invited into someone else's world. He just stepped in and rearranged the furniture. And the worst part, it didn't even look smug. He looked bored. Like winning came so naturally to him, he could barely be bothered to enjoy it. The entire time I stood there, invisible. Her husband, or whatever I was supposed to be in that moment. It wasn't just a kiss on the cheek. It was. How long it lingered, how her eyes didn't dart over to me afterward, how nobody seemed to question it, how normal it all felt to everyone but me. Later, as I walked back from the restroom, I passed a small cluster of their coworkers. One of them, I think his name was Finn or Flynn. Something insufferably trendy muttered, "They're basically a power couple at this point." Another chimed in, "Her actual husband's here tonight too, right?" And they laughed. They actually laughed. That was when I knew. It wasn't a suspicion. It wasn't a hunch. It wasn't a feeling I'd try to explain away later. It was clarity. Cold, immediate, and sharp. Like stepping into a room and realizing someone's changed the locks behind you. And just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, Collier found me. He didn't say much. Just leaned in with his perfect suit and his perfect haircut and said, "You're handling this well. I respect that." I stared at him. Handling what? He smiled. The kind of smile you give a child who's finally figured out the obvious, and said, "Everything. You know this shift? Not all men would take it so quietly. That was it." I didn't break the glass this time, set it down neatly, and I walked out. I walked 15 blocks in the wrong direction before I realized I was shaking. That was 3 nights ago. Tomorrow morning, she's going to wake up to something she never expected. And no, it's not a suitcase. It's worse. She didn't notice anything different the next morning. That's how far we drifted a mile apart in the same kitchen. She was sipping her oat milk latte, scrolling through her phone like she didn't just publicly erase me from her life 24 hours earlier. I'd spent most of the night lying awake on the couch, the guest blanket twisted around my legs, staring at the ceiling like it owed me answers. But I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger would have made it easier. Instead, I felt something worse, a kind of dull ache, like the realization that someone stopped loving you a long time ago and you missed every sign because you were too busy believing in them. While she tapped through Instagram stories and emailed her assistant, I looked at the photo on our living room wall, the one from a road trip in Maine. She was in my arms, covered in sand, laughing into my neck. I remember setting it on a timer, running back to the rocks, and catching the frame just in time. We looked so real then. I hadn't touched that photo in years. Now, I took it off the wall. I didn't smash it. I didn't burn it. I opened the back and slid the picture out. All that remained in the frame was an empty white square on the wall, and somehow that looked more honest. She didn't even ask why. That afternoon, I went to the one place I thought I'd never need. Storage unit number 309 at Baxter Drive. A boring little metal door in a building that always smelled like damp cardboard. But inside were all the old versions of me, the me before her. Stacks of notebooks, backup drives, prototype designs for a startup. I never had the guts to finish because I believed supporting her career was more important. I found a hard drive labeled Untapped and smiled. It was from 3 years ago, the last time I tried to make something that was mine. I plugged it in that night, quietly, while she was on a Zoom call in the bedroom with a New York client. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I heard. Laughter. And then, you should have seen his face. The poor guy still thinks we're on the same team. Not angry. Not even cruel. Just amused. Then Collier's voice came through, soft and unhurried. Owen's a placeholder. You're the one playing chess. I didn't make a sound. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe loud enough to betray I was there. I just listened, like a man eavesdropping on his own obituary. She said something next that stuck in my spine. If he leaves, but he won't. He's too loyal for his own good. She was right. I had been... Until now, I didn't confront her. That's not how this ends. Instead, I booked a meeting. Not with a lawyer, with an investor. One of the only people who ever believed in the early ideas I had buried to keep our marriage afloat. When I told him I was finally ready to go all-in. On my project, he said 7 words I'll never forget. Why'd you wait so long to wake up? That night, I removed myself from our shared bank accounts. I canceled the Paris anniversary reservation she didn't know I knew about. The one she'd planned with Collier under the label Q3 Offsite. And then I printed something. 1 sheet, 1 sentence. No name, no accusations, just words she'd understand. I left it where her framed photo used to be. I was loyal. You were strategic. She found it the next evening. The sound she made wasn't anger. It was panic. And that's when everything really began to unravel. She didn't call right away. That surprised me. I expected her to rage or fake confusion, maybe gaslight me into thinking I'd misunderstood something. But for almost a full day, there was silence. Not even a text, just absence. And for the first time in years, I didn't chase after it. I let the silence hang. Around 11 p.m., my phone lit up. Nadine, 12 missed calls, 1 new voicemail. Didn't. Play it. I watched the notification fade. Then put the phone screen down on the bedside table of the cheapest motel I could find outside the city. A room with scratchy sheets and a buzzing ice machine down the hall. It was exactly what I needed. It's nothing comfortable, nothing familiar, just stillness. But the voicemail stayed in my mind. So at 2 a.m., curiosity cracked me. Her voice was shaky, which was rare. Nadine didn't tremble, she calculated. But this was something else. Owen, okay, you're scaring me. What are you doing? What does this mean? Can we just talk, please? I think maybe you misunderstood something. That word again. Misunderstood. Like I just imagined the humiliation, the laughter, the lies. She paused for a second before finishing. I'm home. Just please come home. Didn't. Instead, I sent her a photo. No text, just an image. It was our wedding photo, the one we used to keep on the nightstand. But I had carefully burned out everything in the background until it was just the 2 of us, floating in a gray void. Her hand in mine, her smile still whole, but everything around us erased. She replied instantly, Nadine, what is this supposed to mean? I didn't answer. She figured it out soon enough. The next morning, I checked into a co-working loft downtown. It's a kind you pay for by the hour and share with other people pretending not to be rebuilding their lives. I plugged in my laptop, opened a folder I'd labeled Reclaim, and got to work on the one thing I'd abandoned for years. My own ideas. By noon, I had a wireframe. By evening, I had interest. It was almost funny. I'd spent years wondering if I was still useful. All it took was stepping away from her orbit to find out I'd never actually been broken, just dimmed. That night, Nadine finally sent the message I was waiting for. We need to talk. I think you're being dramatic. No, you're making a mistake, Owen. Call your eye. It's not what you think. This could ruin everything. This could ruin everything. Not I love you. Not I'm sorry. Just a warning about her image, her status. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control. So I sent her another image. This time, it was a screenshot, a forwarded calendar invite labeled Q3 Offsite Paris Collier, Nadine. Her work email, his initials. Her reply took 7 seconds. This was a planning error. It was nothing personal. You're twisting this. And then, please, delete that. If someone else sees it, it could cost me everything. There it was. Not guilt, not love, just fear, she called. I declined again and again. And as I stared at my screen, I realized something else. She still thought I was bluffing, that I'd come crawling back, that I'd forgive, forget, and fall back into place. But this time, I had something she didn't account for. I was done needing her approval. And for a woman like Nadine, nothing is more dangerous than a man who finally stops caring what she thinks. I don't think she cried. Not when she realized I wasn't bluffing, not when my name disappeared from our shared calendar. Not even when she came home and saw that my side of the closet looked like it had never existed. She didn't cry. She strategized. Nadine always treated emotions like currency. You didn't spend them unless they got you something. So I wasn't surprised when she showed up 2 days later, unannounced, at the co-working space I'd been using. Somehow she'd found me. Maybe she'd tracked my location through some old setting I forgot to disable. Or maybe she just knew how I thought. She walked in like she still owned my life. Hair perfect, makeup surgical, wearing the same perfume I used. To buy for her as a gift. Like she thought that scent still had a hold on me. I looked up from my laptop and said nothing, just stared. She smiled, but her eyes were scanning the room, my screen, my face, like she was still in control of the narrative. "Can we talk?" she asked, keeping her voice low, like we were on a stage and she needed to perform calmness for the audience. I nodded but didn't move. She sat across from me anyway. "You made your point," she said loudly. I almost laughed. Loudly. I'd barely said a word. It was the quiet that was eating her alive. "I get it," she continued. "You're angry? You feel ... What? Betrayed? Replaced. I can understand that." She said it like she was reading a script. I didn't speak. She hated that. "You left before I could explain," she added. "I heard you explain," I said. "Finally. You were on Zoom, remember?" Her smile vanished. "That wasn't what it sounded like." "You're right," I said. "It was worse." She leaned forward. "Owen, be realistic. You and I, we had a good thing. But Collier doesn't know where I keep the spare keys," I interrupted. "But he's welcome to change the locks now." That hit her. For the first time, her expression cracked. And under all that poise, I saw it. Desperation. "You're being reckless," she hissed. "You're throwing away everything we built over some bruised ego." But that was when I realized she genuinely thought this was about pride. As if she hadn't surgically removed me from her life while keeping me around for appearances. As if I hadn't spent years shrinking so she could shine. As if she hadn't handed over her loyalty to a man who treated me like wallpaper and assumed. I'd just smile through it. "You're not listening," she said, sharper now. "You don't understand what this could cost me." "I do," he replied. "That's why I left." She stood up so fast her chair rocked. I didn't flinch. She looked down at me like she was waiting for me to ask her to stay. I didn't. Instead, I opened a new tab on my screen, typed something into a document, and said without looking up, "Tell Collier congratulations. You both just inherited each other's consequences." That was it. She walked out, but not before she whispered, "You're going to regret this." I watched her leave. She still thought this was about revenge. It wasn't. It was about release. Just as she reached the elevator, I opened my email and clicked send. Attached was a carefully worded resignation letter. Not mine, hers. It had been sitting in my drafts for weeks, hidden under a project folder. A copy was already queued for the firm's executive inbox. And thanks to a few unsent messages I'd found on her laptop weeks ago, ones I don't think she ever meant to send, the words I used were hers, almost word for word. By the time she made it back to her office, her reputation would already be bleeding. I hadn't said a single lie. There are moments that feel quiet on the outside but explode internally. Watching the clock strike 10:01 a.m. on a Tuesday while sitting in a cafe across from her firm's building was one of them. She always checked her inbox at 10 sharp. It was part of her routine. I'd watched it for years. Coffee, inbox, calendar scan, then that little lip press she did when something annoyed her. I pictured it clearly, only this time the annoyance wasn't a double-booked meeting or an underling's mistake. It was her own resignation, submitted with time-stamped drafts from her laptop. Okay, perfectly crafted email she never sent but almost did. I just finished what she started. The documents I attached to it, well, they were real, personal thoughts. She'd typed in her notes app. Rambling frustrations from long nights, naming names, mocking coworkers. Even describing how she was only a few drinks away from telling Collier how replaceable he actually is. That line alone could burn bridges into ash. I didn't twist her words. I didn't even exaggerate. I let her speak for herself. By 10:07, I saw the movement. Through the glass wall of the top-floor conference room, 2 executives stood beside her. They weren't smiling. She was standing now, not sitting, arms folded, jaw set. I couldn't hear what was said, but I didn't need to. People who control the story don't like being caught inside one they didn't write. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee and watched as she stormed out of the glass room. Her phone was already in her hand. She was dialing. I muted her call without answering. 2 minutes later, a text, "Nadine, this is malicious. Where are you?" I didn't reply. Then came another. "You have no idea what you've just done." But that was the thing I did. She wasn't just angry about being exposed. She was terrified of losing what she couldn't admit she built through manipulation. That company wasn't just her workplace. It was her identity, her currency, her image. And for the first time, she wasn't in control of the narrative. I walked away from the cafe, not in triumph, not in smugness, but in something quieter, something closer to clarity. Don't realize how long you've been drowning until your feet touch solid ground again. But I wasn't done. That afternoon, I visited a storage locker on the east side of town. Not mine this time, hers. Registered under her maiden name. I found it accidentally months ago while helping her with insurance paperwork. She never mentioned it again. I'd asked once what she kept there, and she said, "Old clutter stuff from before you. That should have been a warning." I stood in front of it now with a code she didn't know I had. She used it on everything. Her childhood street number and the year of her first internship. It opened with a heavy metallic click. Inside wasn't clutter. There were sealed boxes of designer gifts, receipts with Collier's initials, a folded copy of a lease for an apartment in another city, a 1-bedroom, no mention of me, signed by her, co-signed by him. She wasn't preparing for a divorce. She was preparing for a disappearance. A version of her that had already moved on, smiling in a new city with a new man, in a new life I wasn't meant to be part of. I wasn't a chapter in her story. I was a footnote. She forgot to delete. I took one thing from the unit, a single sheet, her written list of goals for the year. It had things like double quarterly revenue, complete media training, and at the very bottom, scratched out lightly in pencil, cut the cord completely before Q4. Time to be free. She hadn't written my name, but she didn't need to. That evening, I sent her a photo of it. She didn't respond. For the first time, she was quiet. And in her silence, I finally felt peace. 2 days passed. I was staying in an extended stay place that smelled like burnt coffee and forgotten ambition, the kind of place where men like me land when they don't yet know where they're going. Only that they're never going back. The front desk didn't ask questions, neither did the other guests. There's something oddly comforting about being invisible in a building full of people hiding from something. Nadine hadn't texted again. No calls, no half apologies, no demands, just static. And that silence, it wasn't surrender. It was calculation. She was regrouping. That's how people like her work. When manipulation fails, they disappear just long. Enough to make you wonder if you went too far. But I wasn't wondering anymore. I was building. In the mornings, I worked on my project, finally pitching a tool I'd shelved years ago. By afternoon, I was meeting people, real people, not the social. Mannequins from Nadine's world. Developers, startup advisors. Old friends I hadn't spoken to in years because I was always too busy helping her climb someone else's ladder. And then, one afternoon, I got a voicemail, not from her, from Collier. That alone would have been enough to stop me cold. But it wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Oh, and listen. I didn't expect to be calling you, but I think we should meet. It's 20 minutes. Public place. Your call. There's something you need to know. I'm not your enemy. I replayed it 3 times. Not my enemy. This man stood across from me as my wife. Praised him like a god while I stood on the sidelines holding a drink I never ordered. He smirked when she kissed his cheek. He watched me like I was a relic, and now he wanted to talk. Part of me wanted to delete the message and move on, but the curiosity burned too hot. I texted a location, a quiet bar near the industrial district, the kind with bad lighting and even worse seating. No cameras, no expectations. He replied instantly. That night, he showed up 5 minutes early, which I only knew because I was. Already sitting in the corner, watching, he looked tired, not polished, not smug, just drained. He walked straight to the table, sat down without ordering, and said, "I didn't know she was lying to both of us." I said nothing. I let him talk. I thought she was separated. She told me you two were done, living separate lives. Said you were waiting for the papers. She told me you'd moved on already. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. "Swear to you, Owen, I wouldn't have touched this if I thought you were still with her." I didn't know what to say. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. "I found this in her desk drawer after everything blew up. You should see it." I opened it. Inside was a printed email draft, not sent, just saved. It was from Nadine to another man, a different name entirely. There was a date on it, months before she'd even met Collier. It was flirtatious, intimate, full of inside jokes and subtle promises. She'd ended the message with, "You're the only one who really gets me. I'm just playing house until I can be with someone real." The timestamp didn't lie. She wasn't just cheating with Collier. She'd been playing multiple sides long before either. Of us stepped onto her board. Collier leaned back and exhaled. I was never her first plan, maybe not even her second. I looked at him, really looked, and I didn't see a rival anymore. I saw another casualty. "She's got other plans now," he said quietly. "I heard she's leaving the city. Maybe she's liquidating things." I thought you deserved to know. We sat in silence for a few long minutes. Then he stood up. "You want to hate me, I get it, but she fooled both of us, and she's not done." Walked out, I realized something terrifying. Nadine didn't fall into betrayal. She operated in it. And she was already rewriting the next version of herself, this time without either of us in the way. But I had one last move, and it wasn't revenge. It was exposure. The night after meeting Collier, I couldn't sleep, not because of what he said, but because I believed him. And that made me feel worse. I wanted to hate him. I wanted him to be the villain in all this. But the truth was more twisted than that. Nadine had turned us both into furniture in her life. Functional, decorative, replaceable. That envelope he gave me, the one with the email draft, I scanned it again just to make sure I hadn't missed something. And there was a trail. Not just one message, but a breadcrumb chain of saved drafts. Different names, different tones, but all the same template. Praise them, promise them, plan the exit. She was rehearsing her escape with multiple backups, like she was auditioning men for the role of her next chapter. I wasn't the discarded husband. I was the dress rehearsal. Collier, just a scene partner. The final script hadn't even been cast. Yet that's when it hit me. She wasn't hiding from shame. She was protecting her future. And I still had something that could derail it, her reputation. Not by slandering her, not by shouting on social media or telling my side in some bitter blog. Post. That's not how people like Nadine fall, eh? They don't get exposed by drama. They collapse when their narrative breaks. So I put together a file, quietly, carefully.
Ow.
It included the resignation email she didn't write, the lease document from her, storage unit, the calendar of off-site trips, and excerpts from her saved messages. I didn't forge a word. I didn't speculate. I just arranged what was already hers, like holding up a mirror and letting people see what she always tried to stand in front of. Then I crafted the email. It didn't go to her firm. It went to someone. Hire. The PR strategist she hired 6 months ago, back when she was planning a transition into speaking and leadership branding. The one she wanted to shape her public presence as she quietly shifted from corporate to influencer. He'd never met me, but I introduced myself in the first line, "You don't know me, but I've funded the last 12 years of Nadine's image." The attachments spoke for themselves. I waited 3 days. Nothing. Then, on the 4th, I got the message. Not from Nadine, from her strategist. Subject: urgent clarification request. Nadine C. Thank you for your message. We were unaware of these documents. Nadine has paused all public campaigns for the foreseeable future. Please consider this confidential acknowledgement of receipt. That was it. But I knew what it meant. They believed me. Or at least they believed the paper trail. And now, the rebrand she had quietly invested months into the book deal. The podcast, the seminars, would all evaporate. Not with a bang, but with an administrative freeze. People like Nadine don't fear exposure. They fear irrelevance. And I had handed it to her like a scalpel in her own hand. Later that night, I got a message from an unknown number, just a single line. You're not who I thought you were. I didn't reply. What was left to say? But it stayed with me. Not because of the words, but because for the first time in our entire story, she hadn't used my name. Not Owen, not husband, not even you. Just distance, disbelief. It's almost like she'd finally met the version of me she never expected, the one who could walk away. Not loud, not cruel, but silent and irreversible. I looked around the tiny apartment. I was renting month to month now. It had almost nothing in it. A mattress on the floor, a folding table for a desk, one suitcase, no framed photos. And I felt still Nadine hadn't just betrayed me. She underestimated me. She thought because I was quiet, I was soft. Because I supported her, I didn't have power of my own. But she forgot the most important rule in chess. It's not the queen that ends the game. It's the move you never saw coming. 3 weeks after the last message from Nadine, I walked past a bookstore window and saw her face staring back at me. Not in person, but on a poster. It was old, faded, promoting a women in leadership panel that had quietly been canceled. Though the flyer hadn't been taken down yet. For a second, I stood there and just looked at it. Her smile was frozen mid-pose, confident, calculated, unreachable. A version of her that never really existed. Or maybe did, just never with me. I kept walking. Not because I was angry. Not anymore. Anger, I've learned, burns fast and leaves you hollow. What lasts is something else. A slow, steady return to yourself. A quiet kind of freedom that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Nadine was gone. Not in the dramatic way I'd imagined once. No fiery confrontation. No final insult. She simply vanished. Her resignation held. Her PR campaign crumbled quietly. The firm never reinstated her. The Paris trip never happened. I heard through someone who didn't know they were speaking out of turn that she left the country under a different name. New firm, new start, no notes, no calls, just silence. I never chased it. Instead, I focused on the life I had put off for a decade. The first investor who believed in my product, he brought 2 more. What started as a prototype in a dim co-working space became a functioning platform with a beta launch date. I moved out of the temporary apartment, found a small loft with windows that didn't face another building. I bought 1 chair, nada, set, because I wanted to learn how to sit alone without apologizing for the space I took up. I called old friends. One of them, Casey, invited me to a poetry reading on a Wednesday night. Something I would have said no to a year ago, too afraid. To look like I didn't belong. I went. It wasn't life-changing, but something small happened. After the reading, a woman came up and said she liked my laugh. I hadn't even noticed I was laughing. Her name was Eleanor. She taught literature at a community college. Didn't care about LinkedIn titles or networking ladders. She asked questions that didn't sound like interviews. She listened without scanning the room for someone more important. We got coffee the next week, then again the week after. Nothing rushed. No pressure. Just 2 people reintroducing themselves to the idea of being known. One night, Eleanor asked if I had any regrets. I thought about it for a long time, about everything. The betrayal, the humiliation, the years I'd handed away like loose change. Then I shook my head. No, I said, because all of that led me here. She smiled. Not the kind of smile you force for a photo, but the kind that says, I understand. And I realized something in that moment. Nadine will go on telling her story. She'll find new versions of herself, new people to believe in her polished image. Maybe someone will fall in love with a mask like I did. Maybe they'll even try to fix her. But me, I don't live in that world anymore. I don't need to rewrite what happened. I just needed to